Hey, everybody, I'm with Nick Culbertson, who's actually a neighbor. He lives here in the Baltimore area, and he's the founder and CEO of Protenus. Very exciting times for them. They got additional funding a couple of years ago, off to the races, doing some great things in the healthcare space. So, Nick, welcome and thanks for joining me today. I always like to start out with this first question of kind of what even inspired you to get this whole thing started? Why would you go take a risk and start a cybersecurity company? I mean, you have a very unique background, so maybe share some of that.
Yeah, of course. Great to catch up with you today, Bill. So it was actually an accident. I was in medical school at the time with my co-founder. We both wanted to be academic clinicians, both very focused on research. And so we had our own research projects that we were pursuing. And as friends and with non-traditional healthcare backgrounds, we wanted to do something together. My co-founder used to work at a hedge fund at Bridgewater, and I used to be in the military as a Green Beret and did human intelligence. So we both specialized in different analytical tools to
Very
study
good.
large system environments to find actionable insights. Very different, but similar in many ways. And as we were orienting to the healthcare ecosystem, we thought that there's an opportunity here to use some of the tools and techniques that we did in our previous lives here in healthcare. So we started studying clinical workflows and built a machine learning classifier to kind of predict outcomes based on the care teams that were involved with patient treatment patterns. And quite by accident, discovered employees that were going into records when they weren't supposed to. Maybe their credentials got compromised from a phishing attack. Maybe IT was using their credentials in ways that they weren't supposed to. And so all of this different flavors of insider risk. I started talking to hospital administrators and realized that there was a gap in the market. A lot of vendors focusing on the perimeter defense, but healthcare has really unique workflows. And one of the challenges what we face is that we want to expose the data to as many people as possible. We want clinicians to have access to patient information, but it's very sensitive. So the more people you give access to, the more you increase the threat surface area. And so we consider ourselves the last layer of defense, identifying how people are accessing data and making sure they're using it for clinical or administrative purposes as part of their job description.
Well, I'm sure some of it is snooping, intentional snooping, right? You can certainly stop that from happening. And some of it's, as you said, a credential got taken over. You definitely want to stop that. How much of it is accidental? Can you guys do you any stats on that as well? Somebody just accidentally stepped into a file they shouldn't have stepped into?
Yeah, I actually compare it to the CBRNE, the radio biological nuclear threat spectrum, where you have a high volume of really low risk stuff, like your small explosions. And so there's lots of snooping, lots of accidentally clicking on the wrong record. I did a search, I went to the wrong record, I started doing stuff and I realized it was in the wrong record. A lot of volume of that, where people have the right intentions, but just did something erroneously. Then you have a much smaller volume of the very high malicious, the people scraping identities, looking for personal information, PII, to be able to steal identities or open up a loan in someone's account, or the celebrity snooping, trying to sell details to TMZ or some tabloid or something like that. But when we plot it out, it's actually a pretty neat spectrum where you can see a high volume of low risk events and a low volume of high risk events.
Yeah. So this question would make sense if you were in a space where there were a million competitors. You're sort of unique already in a way, right? I mean, you do something that not a lot of other solutions do, as you said earlier. It's there's a lot of perimeter defenses that we've set up these days, but the insider threat thing is not as prevalent. But what makes your solution unique and different and better, do you think?
There are a couple other vendors in the space. A lot of the technologies that came from other industries or have been around for a number of years and are more report driven. I think there's two things that make our product unique. The first is that we have that clinical context. It's built to really understand the workflows of hospital administrations. And the other thing is the narrative assessment that our AI generates.
Hmm.
We were built with AI in the core of our product. I actually think about the the Warhog, the big plane with the
Yeah,
that's built around a Gatling gun. They
and it
build a
is.
massive Gatling gun and then build wings on it
Yeah.
instead of building the plane and trying to squeeze onto it. And that's really what we are. We're an AI at the core that generates this narrative assessment. I think a lot of tools, when you see a demo, there's dashboards, there's pie charts, there's graph, but it's not actionable. And people are
Mm.
always taken aback when they see our demo because the first thing you see is a story. You read it and it says the reason that this person accessed this record this day and it's questionable is because this patient wasn't in clinic this day and none of their peers accessed the record, and all of these reasons that help you conduct an investigation as to the appropriateness of their access to the record. And it's just so actionable
It
that
is.
it really helps us stand apart. So usually our demos are very fast. We pull that
Yeah.
open and we read it and let our customer react. And I think that really guides our value proposition.
What drove you to that type of solution? Because I'm a big fan of that, right? I love actionable response from any software product in the cybersecurity space. Tell me what happened and what I am to do, especially with today's analysts who are overwhelmed. What led you to that? What made you think of that early on?
A highly iterative feedback loop with our customers. We would always ask, what are you going to do with this information? What are you going to do next? And then they would say, well, I have another question. I need to answer this question. And what we saw is they're building a case.
Mm.
They're trying to understand the story of what's happening. And so anywhere we saw an opportunity that we could automate or improve the process for them, help them take them to the finish line of the process, that's what we were guiding for. We didn't want to just surface an alert and say, here you go, now you investigate, because that's where a lot of the time is spent with privacy and security analysts, is they're investigating the context and trying to answer all these questions. And we thought if we just answer them, they can start to take action from the beginning.
Yeah, and again, this next question is also maybe less appropriate because you're so niche, right? The thing that you do is so specific, but sort of how do you cut through the noise in a CISO's day where they have a million vendors banging on their door? You should do this, you should do this. What have you seen successfully break through that noise?
I think the question's so appropriate because we often get the question, well, if you're a cybersecurity vendor, what else do you do? Can you do this? And there's a lot of vendor consolidation. People want to see one tool do multiple things. I think the way that we approach this, there's nothing that frustrates a CISO more than when people are calling everything a nail for their hammer and saying, "Oh yeah, we've solved that, we've solved this." And we train our team in solution selling, helping us understand what the customer is solving for and being helpful in how we could either help with them or how something else can help them. So we'll get questions sometimes that we just say that's an SIEM. That's better for some other tool or some other vendor. We don't do that. We have this very specific use case that if you need help with, we'll help you with. But if not, we're not going to try to sell you something that is not on your roadmap, it's not on your priority list, or not something that you need today. And that approach, especially in a vertical industry like healthcare, is so important because they may not be able to buy now, but they might buy next year or the year after. And establishing yourself as someone that understands their problem and is willing to help, I think, is really important.
Yeah, in today's environment where venture-backed firms have such unbelievable pressure to hit sales goals, sometimes just completely unrealistic, it's interesting to hear your patience. I mean, you said something that so few vendors say is, well, maybe it's not now. Maybe it's 9 months. Maybe it's 18 months from now. It's recognizing that. I'm pleased to hear you say that. So interesting. Can you give us a case study? Obviously, you can't mention, a brand or a company name unless they've authorized you, but where you made a significant difference and maybe you use them as a reference customer.
I joke that we have the same problem as the CIA. We can't really celebrate our successes because
Mhm.
we identified it proactively and helped them contain the issue. But we have so many different times we get on a call with our customer and talk about these large consequential events, especially in today's environment where cybersecurity breaches are just going up and up and up. We publish every year our breach barometer that talks about the volume of data breaches and privacy and security incidents in healthcare. And it's just astronomical how it's increasing because of that threat surface area. The risk for healthcare is just so high. But we do have lots of great use cases. One of my favorite was a customer of ours that used a legacy vendor before. They had a large incident where someone was slowly scraping off medical record information and selling it, using it for nefarious purposes for a number of years. And they were caught in an audit, fined millions of dollars by the Office of Civil Rights. And so had this clear issue where we said we had this problem, it went undetected for a long time. They implemented our solution, and within a year, they caught precisely the same thing. And the difference was that instead of it happening for a long time going undetected, we caught it when it happened. And so we were able to put together this case study that says, here's what happens when you don't have us and the damages that it cost.
Right.
Here's what happens when you do have us. And they got audited by the OCR again, and they walked away without any penalties because they saw they were using a proactive approach. They were using the best technology to stay on top of this and ultimately protecting those patients' information.
Yeah, that is a great case study. I'm sure if you can use that as a reference, you do. And I think that's always a win. Anytime you can save somebody dollars from a compliance problem or make them more efficient, those two things seem to be the key. We have told most of our members that when a vendor comes in, what is it you ask them? And they all say the same thing. What do you replace in my environment? You kind of can't be additive. And matter of fact, if you could do a 2-for-1 swap, I'd be even more interested in your solution. If you can get rid of two things for your one thing, you're very specific in what you do. So there's only so much you can replace, but I can see the need for it. So interesting. Well, you're based on AI. You were built around the Gatling gun. So it is interesting to hear all the buzz today is, you go out to RSA and Black Hat and everybody says, oh, we're using AI and large language models in our solution. You based it on that. So talk to me about what AI will improve in your solution over time and how will you continue to use it?
So we have an active team of PhD level data scientists, engineers that are constantly tuning our analytics. Our customers mark false positives in our algorithm for us, and they're labeling the data. So we monitor that as one of our company metrics. And anytime we see a change, we'll fine tune the analytics. And our customers also give us recommendations of more questions they ask. That iterative feedback loop I mentioned continues to this day, where we say, can we go back to the algorithm and publish a new release to be able to catch more different types of cases or more risk. So that's a really active process. We actually have a challenge where people forget that we are an AI product, and that's because to me, AI is a tool. It's
Right.
not the product. It is the means to an end. And sometimes you can do just simple analytics. Sometimes you can do statistical inference. And sometimes you need a classifier. And sometimes you need a generative AI. And it's back to that nail and hammer concept. It's the right
Right.
tool for the right job. But we'll talk about the value proposition of what we do. We help you find proactively these insider threats and give you the narrative of what happened so that you can take action to it. There's no mention usually of AI. And so when people buy our solution, use the solution, they say, oh, are you incorporating AI into your solution? We'd say, well, it is AI. It's been that way for 10 years now and been operating. It's not generative AI necessarily, but helping people understand that AI is a tool, and really it's about what does the tool do for you? Is it really solving a problem? How does it work with a security risk? And so I often encourage people, just when they hear the word AI, just replace it with tool and
Right.
rethink about the problem in terms of what it's delivering. Because a lot of vendor pitches can fall apart when they're just saying, oh, it's an LLM, it's an AI, it's going to do it all for you. It's like selling magic.
I agree. Will there be, and I haven't seen the interface in quite some time, will there be an opportunity for your end user to interact with your solution through an AI interface where, I ask it questions and it responds in a way? I mean, is that something you're leaning toward or does it do that already?
We've researched this quite a bit, both internally and with partners, not just around the dialogue,
Mhm.
because our goal is to take you to the end of the investigation, have all the answers there, but also around the complicated regulatory environment. So it's like now that I found this, based on where it happens and the state jurisdiction, the people that were involved, does this qualify under GDPR? Does this qualify under HIPAA? What are the follow-up steps that I need to do? And we built in privacy security a lot of subject matter expertise, but as we train new individuals, they might have questions about that. So that's something that we've done a lot of research for. It's not a core part of our mission because detecting and proactively identifying the solution is, but I do think there's an opportunity to reinforce expertise by just being able to query an LLM and get guidance. I think the trick though is what level of accuracy you're willing to take. And anytime you get into legal or
Hmm.
compliance,
Right.
you have to think about your error. And we've optimized our analytics for specificity. We want to minimize as much false positives. We can never guarantee we find everything,
Yep.
but we want to make sure that when patients' data and lives are included, you're not going down a wild goose chase and submitting something wrong that's going to backfire with more devastating consequences. It's
Yeah,
effort,
or suddenly a liability issue where your software provided an answer and they thought, well, that's it, it's gospel. Well, it's just a piece of advice, right? It's one
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle. But I could imagine power users of your solution wanting to interact with it in a way where they ask a question, they put a query in and get something back. But obviously, you know your customers really well, and as you said, you do a annual customer uh, conference, and certainly you learn a lot that way. Well, let's get to this tough question. This is my favorite one. The last one here is, I mean, you took this risk years ago when going out, finding some investors and going into this market, which is an enormous market, but still highly risky. What advice would you give someone like yourself just starting up with an idea in cyber who wants to start a company and push a solution out?
Well, I've mentioned so many times how customer feedback, that iterative feedback loop from our customers, is really what's driven our whole company's success at this point. And I think that's so important. Anyone looking to start a company, my biggest feedback is how many customers have you talked to? How many people that are actually doing this have given you feedback? In fact, when I meet a young company or an early founder, it's one of the first questions I ask them is like, who are your customers? How are you talking to? How are you spending time? Someone interested in starting a company, I think the best advice is don't start a company. It's get a job, work for
Mhm.
your customer, really get in there and see what's going on so that you're not in the outside looking in and trying to solve something from a distance. It's really understanding the pain point and thinking about the problem holistically. And I think that insight is a big determinant of how helpful you can be in the industry to really solving a problem, especially in this economy where in healthcare, if you don't have an ROI,
Right,
you're not getting anyone's time or attention. So to say, I have the best hammer for all of your nails is just
right.
going to be driving people insane because they can't just pay more for more vendors and more solutions unless it's actually having an impact on their work and actually saving the money.
Yeah, that is the piece of advice almost every one of your peers that I've interviewed has said is ask the customer repeatedly before you write a line of code, make sure you have product market fit and you understand what solution they're looking for. So, yeah, I think it's sage advice. Well, exciting things ahead for you. As you said, you're growing some things. You maybe have a new product release coming up in the future, and we're excited to hear about that. So, thanks for spending time with me today. I appreciate that. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.